In the frozen hell of Finland's winter war, during some of the coldest months ever recorded in that part of the world, one man became so feared by the Soviet Red Army that they gave him a nickname that would echo through military history: the White Death. Simo Häyhä wasn't particularly tall, standing at just 5 foot 3 inches. He wasn't a career soldier with decades of training in elite military academies. He was a Finnish farmer who enjoyed hunting in the vast forests near his home. But when the Soviet Union invaded Finland in November 1939 with overwhelming force, expecting a quick and easy victory, this quiet farmer would transform into the most lethal sniper the world has ever known. Over the course of roughly 100 days, Häyhä would be credited with over 500 confirmed kills using nothing but iron sights on his rifle, operating in temperatures that regularly dropped to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. His impact on the battlefield became so significant that Soviet commanders had to fundamentally alter their tactics, sending entire units with the specific mission of hunting down this one man who was systematically destroying their forces one shot at a time. The story begins with understanding just how lopsided this conflict was from the very start. When Stalin's Red Army crossed the Finnish border on November 30th, 1939, they brought with them nearly 3 times as many soldiers as Finland's entire military could muster. The Soviets had thousands of tanks, thousands of aircraft, and seemingly endless reserves of men and ammunition. Finland, by contrast, was a small Nordic nation with a population of less than 4 million people. Their military was equipped with outdated weapons, they had almost no tanks to speak of, and their air force was virtually non-existent. By every conventional measure of military power, Finland should have been conquered within weeks. The world watched and waited for the inevitable collapse. But the world didn't understand what it means to fight Finns on Finnish soil during Finnish winter. And they certainly didn't understand what Simo Häyhä was capable of. Häyhä was born in 1905 in the municipality of Rautjärvi, in southeastern Finland near the Russian border. His childhood was spent in the forests and fields, learning to hunt, track animals, and survive in conditions that would kill unprepared outsiders. By the time he reached adulthood, he had become an exceptional marksman, the kind of shooter who could hit a target the size of a matchbox from hundreds of yards away. He served his mandatory year of military service in the Finnish army and achieved the rank of corporal, showing enough promise that he was trained in light machine gun use as well as standard infantry tactics. After completing his service, he returned to farming, living a quiet and unremarkable life. He joined a local shooting club and competed in marksmanship competitions, consistently winning or placing near the top. For Häyhä, shooting wasn't just a skill, it was a passion and a form of meditation. He understood his weapons intimately, knowing exactly how they would perform in any condition. When the Soviet invasion began, Finland mobilized every able-bodied man they could find. Häyhä, now 34 years old, reported for duty and was assigned to the 6th Company of JR-34, the 34th Infantry Regiment of the Finnish Army. His unit was stationed in the Kala River area, a strategic position that the Soviets desperately wanted to capture. The terrain here was perfect for the kind of warfare the Finns needed to wage: dense forests, frozen lakes, and rolling hills that provided countless positions for ambush and retreat. The Finns couldn't match Soviet firepower in open battle, so they wouldn't fight open battles. Instead, they would use the environment as a weapon, striking from concealed positions, inflicting casualties, and disappearing back into the white wilderness before the enemy could respond. For this type of warfare, snipers were invaluable, and Simo Häyhä was about to prove just how devastating a single skilled sniper could be. Häyhä's approach to sniping was unique, even unconventional by military standards. While many snipers preferred to use scoped rifles that allowed for greater accuracy at extreme ranges, Häyhä used his standard-issue Mosin Nagant M28-30 rifle equipped only with iron sights. His reasoning was practical and brilliant. A telescopic scope, while offering magnification, also created several problems in the brutal Finnish winter. The glass could fog up from the shooter's breath or freeze over in the extreme cold. The scope raised the rifle's profile, making it easier for enemy soldiers to spot the glint of glass or the higher silhouette. Most importantly, using iron sights allowed Häyhä to keep his head lower and maintain a smaller profile while shooting. He had trained with iron sights his entire life and could shoot just as accurately with them as most snipers could with scopes. His intimate knowledge of his weapon and his extraordinary natural ability meant he simply didn't need the magnification that would come with additional vulnerabilities. Every detail of Häyhä's technique was calculated for maximum effectiveness and survival. He would arrive at his shooting position before dawn, often lying in the snow for hours waiting for targets to present themselves. To conceal his position, he would pile snow in front of his rifle's muzzle and wet it down so that when he fired, the muzzle blast wouldn't kick up clouds of powder snow that would give away his location. He would keep snow in his mouth while shooting to prevent his breath from condensing in the cold air and creating visible vapor that Soviet soldiers could spot. He wore entirely white camouflage clothing that made him virtually invisible against the snow-covered landscape. His small stature, which might have been a disadvantage in other contexts, became an asset here because it meant he could make himself even smaller and harder to detect. The effectiveness of Häyhä's methods became apparent almost immediately. Soviet soldiers began dying, sometimes several in quick succession, without anyone being able to identify where the shots were coming from. Officers would be hit first, creating confusion and chaos in enemy ranks. Machine gunners would be eliminated, removing the greatest threats to Finnish infantry. Soldiers who exposed themselves for even a moment would drop dead from bullets that seemed to come from nowhere. The psychological impact of this invisible killer was devastating to Soviet morale. Soldiers became afraid to move, afraid to raise their heads above cover, afraid to approach certain areas where the White Death was known to operate. They started calling him Deadliest, the White Death, a ghost in the snow that could kill from impossible distances without ever being seen. Soviet commanders couldn't ignore the problem. One sniper was killing enough of their men to impact entire operations. Artillery strikes were called in on suspected sniper positions, sometimes entire grids being saturated with shells in attempts to kill Häyhä. Counter-sniper teams were organized and sent into the forests with the specific mission of finding and eliminating him. The Soviets even brought in their own elite snipers, men trained at the finest military schools, equipped with the best rifles and scopes available. None of it worked. Häyhä was too smart, too patient, and too skilled. He would change positions constantly, never shooting from the same spot twice if he could avoid it. He understood the terrain better than the invaders ever could, and his shooting ability was simply on another level. There are accounts of him killing multiple targets in less than a minute, each shot precisely placed, before vanishing into the forest. The numbers speak to something that seems almost superhuman. Over the course of approximately 100 days of active combat, from the beginning of December 1939 until he was seriously wounded in early March 1940, Häyhä was credited with over 500 confirmed sniper kills. These were confirmed kills, meaning witnessed by other soldiers or officers and documented. The actual number was likely higher because not every kill could be confirmed in the chaos of combat. Beyond his rifle work, Häyhä was also deadly with a Suomi KP/-31 submachine gun, and he's credited with as many as 200 additional kills using that weapon in close-quarters combat situations. That means this one man, in just over 3 months, may have killed close to 700 enemy soldiers. To put that in perspective, he was averaging around 5 to 7 kills per day, every single day, while operating in some of the worst weather conditions imaginable, while being actively hunted by thousands of enemy soldiers who wanted nothing more than to kill him. The conditions these men fought in were almost unimaginable. The winter of 1939 to 1940 was one of the coldest on record. Temperatures regularly dropped below -40 degrees, cold enough that metal would freeze to expose skin, cold enough that weapons would malfunction if not properly maintained, cold enough that frostbite could claim fingers or toes in minutes. Soviet soldiers, many of them from warmer regions of the USSR, were poorly equipped for this environment. They wore brown uniforms that stood out starkly against the white snow. They moved in large formations along roads and trails because the deep snow made movement difficult. They were unprepared, undersupplied, and increasingly demoralized as the quick victory they'd been promised turned into a brutal nightmare. The Finns, by contrast, were in their element. They knew how to dress for the cold, how to move through deep snow on skis, how to survive and fight in conditions that incapacitated their enemies. And none embodied this advantage better than Häyhä. On March 6, 1940, Häyhä's incredible run came to a sudden and violent end. While engaging Soviet forces, he was hit in the lower left jaw by an explosive round, possibly from an anti-tank rifle or a heavy machine gun. The bullet destroyed the left side of his face, taking out teeth and bone and exiting through his cheek. By all accounts, he should have died almost instantly from this wound. The soldiers who found him believed he was dead, but Häyhä's legendary toughness extended beyond his shooting skills. He regained consciousness and was evacuated to a field hospital, then to more advanced medical facilities. He spent weeks in a coma, and when he finally awoke on March 13th, it was the same day that Finland and the Soviet Union signed an armistice ending the war. He had literally fought until the last day of the conflict. The war ended with Finland maintaining its independence, something virtually no one had expected when the invasion began. The Soviets had achieved some territorial gains, but at an enormous cost. They had lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers, had their military reputation severely damaged on the world stage, and had failed to conquer Finland despite overwhelming numerical superiority. The Finnish defense, characterized by tactics like those Häyhä employed, had shown that determination, skill, and knowledge of terrain could offset massive disadvantages in men and material. Simo Häyhä had become the embodiment of Finnish resistance, the soldier who proved that one man with courage and skill could make a real difference. Häyhä survived his catastrophic wound, though his face was permanently disfigured and had to be partially reconstructed through multiple surgeries. He was promoted to second lieutenant, a rare battlefield promotion in recognition of his extraordinary service. After the war, he returned to farming and hunting, living a quiet life in southeastern Finland. He never sought fame or attention for what he'd done. When journalists would occasionally find him and ask about his experiences, he would give short, modest answers. Asked once how he had become such a good shot, he reportedly replied simply, "Practice." When asked if he regretted killing so many men, he said he only did what was necessary to defend his country. He lived to the remarkable age of 96, passing away in 2002, more than 60 years after his 100 days as the White Death had made him a legend. The legacy of Simo Häyhä extends far beyond the impressive kill count that made him famous. His story has become a case study in military academies around the world, analyzed for lessons about asymmetric warfare, the importance of training and preparation, and the impact that highly skilled individual soldiers can have on larger conflicts. Modern snipers study his techniques, particularly his emphasis on concealment, patience, and his unconventional choice to use iron sights. His story is taught as an example of how smaller forces can effectively resist larger invaders through superior tactics and determination. For Finland, Häyhä remains a national hero, a symbol of the courage and resilience that allowed their small nation to maintain independence against a superpower that wanted to absorb them. What makes Häyhä's achievement even more remarkable is the context in which it occurred. He wasn't operating from a safe distance with modern technology. He was on the front lines, in direct contact with enemy forces, in conditions that would kill most people even without someone shooting at them. He faced artillery barrages, counter-sniper operations, and eventually the wound that nearly killed him. He did all of this as a 34-year-old farmer with minimal formal military training beyond his mandatory service. He didn't have expensive equipment or a support team. He had his rifle, his white camouflage, his knowledge of the forests, and his extraordinary skill. That was enough to make him the deadliest sniper in military history, the man who forced one of the world's largest armies to change how they operated, the phantom in the snow who became the White Death.